Is one of the most exciting and challenging times of one's life. But given how many 20-something-year-olds are depressed, medicated, and otherwise cast adrift, it appears to be especially tumultuous to be on the cusp of adulthood right now. Today, we are going to discuss why this is and contemplate how should one navigate this critical decade, coming from someone who is trying to do so herself. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Hey everyone, and welcome to Timeless. I hope that you're having a great week. Just a reminder to hit the subscribe button down below so that you never miss a video, whether it's Julie Noted. I most recently talked about China dominating the Middle East. You gotta go watch that. Or whether it's my shows here, Timeless Topics. Today, as you know from the introduction, we are going to be talking about being in your 20s. I am 23 years old. I am going to be 24 years old in a few months, and I feel like once I hit 24, then I'm officially super old. And so I have a lot of anxiety about how I should be spending this decade. And I'll tell you that this show was inspired by an experience I had this past weekend, which heightened this anxiety that I already had, but just made it really more come to the surface, and I want to now talk about it with you. This past weekend, I was actually out of town. I went to go visit my grandma in rural New Hampshire. And what we did, my parents and me, is that we flew into Boston. And instead of doing a 5-hour flight to Boston and then driving 3 hours to New Hampshire in the same day, we decided to stay over one night in Boston. My parents thought that it would be fun and maybe cute for me if we stayed over in Harvard Square. I went to Harvard for college. I graduated just about a year ago. Actually, when we went this past weekend, it was the exact 1-year anniversary of graduation. So all of the people were there graduating, or it was actually the day after. So it was like the worst situation possible because all of the regalia and all of the tents and all of that were up for graduation, but none of my friends were there. So I'm there in Harvard Square. We just stayed over one night. And I have to tell you, I was miserable. I was so sad. I wasn't looking forward to going because I just thought it might make me a little nostalgic, but I didn't realize just how nostalgic I would be. And I just walked around Harvard Square. I didn't even go to my dorm. I didn't even kind of go near campus, but just on the outskirts of campus. And every block I walked down, I just remembered something, some really fun memory. I literally, like every corner I turned around, something came back to me. And it just made me realize that this time in my life is over. That adolescence and childhood and the fun college years, I loved Harvard. I had so much fun. I made amazing friends. I had such a great dorm. It was such a happy time in my life. And I think it was just being back there at the time of graduation, seeing that yet another class had graduated, it just solidified to me, this stage of my life is gone. I think there is something to be said for embracing that life moves on and embracing each stage of life and what it brings for you. But as I said, it conjured up these feelings for me about what am I supposed to be doing with my life right now? You know, when you're in your 20s, you get all of these conflicting messages thrown at you. I actually found, I hate to say it because you guys know that I'm not a big fan of social media, but I actually saw this meme that was about one's 20s, and I think it kind of perfectly synopsized the different messages that you have at this age. I want to read it to you. I went back and wrote down the meme. That's how dedicated I am to this particular piece of work on the internet. This meme said, "I am so young, but I'm so old. I should do everything, but I should rest. I can do what I want, but I need to be careful. I'm an adult, but I need help from an adult. I'm leaving, but I feel left behind, and I want to be a kid again, but I also can't wait to be old." It's so true. You're feeling all these things, and also these messages are being pummeled at you that you're never going to be this young again, and you got to go out and have fun and enjoy your youth and your tight skin, and the fact that you can drink and eat burgers at 2 o'clock in the morning and it's not going to mean anything to your figure. We hear that, but then we also hear you got to get serious about your life and find the person you're going to marry and lay the groundwork for a great career. So it's difficult. And then on top of that, It's difficult enough being in your 20s. At any time throughout human history, it's difficult. But especially right now, it appears to be harder because we have confusing and damaging influences available to us. I mentioned at the outset that many 20-year-olds or 20-something-year-olds are depressed and medicated and expressing suicidal ideation. The CDC recently came out with a study that was actually for teenagers, but then they added on it for those in my generation, so those up until the age of 25, and say that 3 out of 5 of women in that age bracket say that they are depressed. I, from an anecdotal perspective, just can see a lot of people who I went to college with, a lot of the people who I know in my age range are medicated and also feeling sort of adrift. And it's paradoxical because on the one hand, we are the most medicated, depressed generation in American history, but we are also the most prosperous, most educated, most praised generation in American history. We have record numbers of people getting college degrees and postgraduate degrees. We have seen a lot of economic mobility. There are more people in their 20s that are financially secure than 3 decades earlier. So what is causing this? Also, we are, as I'm going to get into in this episode, we're definitely living through a weird time, which is contributing to this malaise. But we're not living through World War I or World War II or the Vietnam War or something. It's knock wood, at least right now, a relative time of peace and stability. So I'm fascinated by this confluence of your 20s being difficult already, and then you, as a 20-year-old living in America right now, experiencing some challenges that seem to be a symptom of a greater culture that's making this time in your life even harder. So I want to talk about why this is and offer some solutions. Now, I don't claim to know the diagnosis very well or know the solutions very well. But again, this is just from my perspective of someone who's in the thick of it and trying to navigate it myself. Now, starting off, I'm actually going to start in the reverse way, not identifying the problem and the solution, but the solution and then understanding how the problem subverts us from that solution. In my humble opinion, at least what I'm trying to do right now in this age, I think that your 20s are about 2 things: worldview and action. The first, worldview. I think it's very important at this stage in our lives when our brains are still kind of malleable, when the rest of our lives isn't charted out yet. By the way, you know what's so fun about your 20s? I said this to a friend the other day. I said some of the most important people in your life you haven't even met yet when you're in your 20s. Your spouse, your children, some of your best friends, some of your work colleagues. You've never even met many of them yet. That's fun. That's a really exciting thing to be on the cusp of, even with all of its challenges. But that's an aside. As far as a worldview, I think we have to develop a moral and spiritual way of looking at life. I kind of view this as your compass that will carry you through the joys and the challenges that are going to face you. No one talks about that anymore. I recently did a show on this show, as opposed to another show I do. Well, I guess I do Dennis and Julie, but I did a show on this show about graduation speeches, and I actually interviewed David McCullough, who gave this amazing graduation address to Wellesley High School about 10 years ago. And I interviewed him because one of the things I said, as someone who recently graduated from college, is that so many commencement addresses are so barren as far as life wisdom and advice that's valuable for young people. If you listen to these speeches, what they do is they say, oh my God, you're the generation that survived COVID and you had to be sent home from school during the time of COVID and you guys are so resilient and you protested against racism and you demonstrated for climate change reform. I mean, it's throwing all of these platitudes and praise in your face. And it's also doomsday. The world is in turmoil and racism is around every corner and you're going to be the generation that is going to fix it because you're so great. When you're sitting there as a graduate, you don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear about racism. You don't want to hear about climate change. And believe it or not, I actually don't think a lot of graduates want to hear about how great they are. Because you're sitting there and maybe, I don't know, maybe some people think they're great, but you kind of are thinking, I don't know what the hell I'm doing with my life. And I want someone to help me figure it out and tell me some wisdom that I can carry forth in this next chapter. The worldview component is very important. Your worldview are the glasses through which you view life. Your worldview can determine whether you are a happy person or an unhappy person. Your worldview can determine the way that you approach challenges. Your worldview can determine the way that you live in every possible arena. If you view your life as a grand and fascinating adventure, you will be more likely to find the love of your life, to find that career path that you want, to go to the places that you want to go. If you view life as a meaningless speck of dust on the great canvas that is human history, and you're just this insignificant part of it, you're not going to be as likely to go do those things that you want to do. So what if you develop a good view of yourself and of the world? It's that thing that will take you through any and all situations. Building that infrastructure right now is so important. I'm going to get to actions in a moment, but I think that we focus too much on actions in one's 20s. You gotta go to business school. You gotta get this graduate degree. You gotta work, this job with this salary. You gotta go to this club. You gotta go to this concert. Those are all actions. People gravely underestimate the importance of building up your brain. As corny as it sounds, this is what I try to do on this show. I call it timeless because I believe that I possess and am trying to share a timeless, eternal worldview. There are certain principles and certain ways of looking at things that can be applied to different situations, and they are the referendum that thousands of years of human history has produced. It has produced this way of thinking that I think is very valuable. But also, you notice on this show, I talk about Islam, I talk about Machiavelli, I talk about owls, I talk about helicopter parenting, I talk about a lot of different subjects. Because as much for myself as for you, I'm trying to show the repertoire of what there is out there. That there is so much for us to consider and enjoy beyond just the political. And I think in your 20s, if you open yourself up to the possibilities in life, that will enrich you and actually maybe inspire a journey for you that you would never otherwise go down. Many of you know about my story with Dennis Prager. I was not a conservative for most of my life. I was actually a liberal. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And I just decided when I was in COVID, of all things, when I had just been sent home from college and it was the lockdown period and I had nothing to do, I decided to explore a little bit. And I actually ordered a Bible commentary. It wasn't Dennis's, but then I ordered Dennis's because I thought, I don't know anything about religion, but billions of people on earth believe in Christianity. Maybe it should be something that I should consider. And then reading that brought me to Dennis's Bible commentary, and seeing the world around me brought me to conservatism, and it opened this new chapter of my life, and look where I am now. Just having the curiosity to read the Bible, to understand it historically. If you allow yourself to go to a new interest or a new part of life that can inform your worldview, it may take you down a different career path. It may take you down a different romantic path. But we're so rigid nowadays. We have to follow this prescribed, desiccating, boring path. And it's sad. Now on to the second thing, actions. Because I'm talking all about worldview, but actions are important too. Actions, though, I think what one has to do in their 20s is look at what has worked for 5,000 years of human civilization and try to do that as best you can in your life. What has 5,000 years of human civilization produced? I think it's produced some pretty stark and clear conclusions. First, that the nuclear family is very important. It's not only important for society, but it's important for you and your self-actualization, and not to mention the kids that you will bear. People who are married and who have families are far happier and far more functional than those who don't. That's one of the conclusions. Another conclusion is that working hard, being diligent, doing the right thing will lead you down a more stable, sure life path than viewing life as a game and something to just be toyed around with recklessly. joining fraternal, filial, civil, or civic, organizations, whether it be a church or synagogue or a pickleball league or I don't know, what else do people do? See, I'm actually struggling right now. I'll be honest with you. I'm struggling to think about what those things are because we don't have them anymore. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in a few moments. I am struggling to tell you what filial organizations are because we don't have them. But still, those are some of the conclusions. And in my life, I'm trying to work on finding things in my own community that I can go to and meet new people, because that is one of the things, the guardrails that human civilization has produced. And I think you have to figure out the closest thing that you want. Even if you don't know what you want to do in your career, figure out what the closest thing is and take a risk. Yes, your 20s are about laying a groundwork, but you should also, as they say in golf, hit your mulligans in your 20s. That is the time to go after something that you might otherwise not go after because you have some time to rebound. Bringing this back to my experience with Dennis, and by the way, I'm saying this as someone who doesn't have their 20s figured out. And I hope I'm not making it sound like I have it all figured out and let me here regale you with it. I'm trying to figure it out myself, but I look back and I do think some decisions that I made with the help of great advice and guidance did put me on a good path. And one of those things was taking a risk of emailing Dennis Prager. I never thought he would respond to me. I had no idea if he would respond to me, but I decided, what is an email telling him how much I appreciated his work and maybe asking if I could work with him one summer? What is that going to cost me? 10 minutes of my life if he doesn't respond? Big whoop. And then he did respond. And then I did work for him for one summer. And now I have a show with him. You never know where it can take you. But I think the action and taking risks, but calculated and principled risks, alongside developing a robust worldview, is the way that we should spend these parts of our lives. So now moving on to, why are we all so depressed? And why is this so hard? Why are people getting married later? Why are people pursuing career paths that they don't want to pursue? We have this phenomenon, and I saw this at Harvard. We have this phenomenon of people who don't have to do certain careers because of their financial situation and are nevertheless doing them because they are so terrified of what other people will think if they don't go work at a fancy law firm or a fancy financial institution. As I said, I have seen this repeatedly. And I'm not just talking about people who come from wealthy families, but if you go to Harvard, you have great connections, you have a great alumni network, you should use that. You should use those resources as an opportunity to venture out and try something out. And you wouldn't believe how many people I've seen who are smart people, who have a lot of potential, and they just go to Goldman or they go to BlackRock or these firms and they don't want to go. And they go on to graduate schools and they don't know what they're doing, but they just want to acquire that fancy name and that degree. What a waste. What a waste of your life. And also, frankly, what a waste of your Harvard education. Part of the reason why I wanted to go to Harvard is because I knew that it would open up a lot of opportunities for me. It would allow me to meet people that I may not otherwise meet, and it would expand my life, or at least give me some opportunities to expand my life. And then you go there and you just kind of throw that out the window because you want to work at a fancy firm. I'm not saying this is everyone who works at a fancy firm, but I'm saying it is a lot of people. So back to this question, why are we so depressed? And why are we seeing these things that are sort of antithetical to how, at least I argue, we should be spending our 20s? I could go down a lot of different arenas right now. I could go down the COVID arena. The COVID lockdowns really kind of screwed my generation over. I lost a year and a half of college due to it. And also, just as an aside, I'll say, we are told about those COVID years that we were so brave to go through them and we were so resilient. And maybe that's true. We were resilient in many ways. But the message that I think that elders, graduation speakers should be telling people my age about the COVID lockdown years is that life is going to present you with things that you didn't think would be thrown at you. Things that are going to be really unfair. For me, I mourn the loss that I lost a huge chunk of college. I'm more in the loss that Harvard's not going to make it up to me. I think some of my friends and I had this weird, even though we knew it wasn't true, we sort of thought in the back of our minds, like, oh, there's no way that they can just let us lose all of this college time and then we graduate. Like, they're going to say, surprise, we're sending you to a camp for a year so you can have an extra year of college. Like, we just thought they would do something. Not actually, but we, in our heads, didn't think that we actually got screwed over. And now that we're graduating and in the real world and we saw, no, we really did get screwed over. We lost over a year of our college experience due to these crazy lockdowns. It's now really hitting us. But still, there's a lesson in that we can take out of that. That life will throw you curveballs that are not fair, may not be rational, and you may not be able to control. But you gotta put your head up and deal with it. So I could go down the COVID route. I could go down the social media route. But I'm going to go down the cultural route because we are being pummeled, at least in my view, with cultural influences that are making it seem like we are on a ship that is going against headwinds. And these headwinds have a way of very easily casting us adrift. So what am I talking about? Well, in your 20s, you kind of have to look, as I said a few moments ago, at what works, what solutions and what conclusions human history has produced, and go in that direction. Put yourself on a good career path, put yourself on a good marriage path, etc. In that way, being in your 20s is a kind of conservatism. This is an idea I'm kind of toying around with. Life is a kind of conservatism. Think about it. We, in every way of our lives, replicate and build on the things that we learned from the past, whether it's brushing your teeth, we learned that from our parents, or wearing proper matching clothes, or going to school. Like, if you are at all repeating what has been done in the past, you are engaging in a kind of conservatism. And that is especially true in your 20s. Your 20s are especially a time when you want to engage in a conservatism, if you will, and mimic some of the things that you've seen people do well. Well, we are in this age where you are not supposed to embrace a kind of conservatism. And I'm not meaning politically. Yes, maybe I am. Of course, there's the idea politically. You're not supposed to be politically conservative. But I just mean in like embracing old ideas and old ways of life or things that have been done before you. In that way, you're really not supposed to be conservative. And think about all of the things. I'm 23 and I look at the world. Think about all of the things in the past few years that people my age have been told was wrong. What you read about in school was wrong. It was, if you read Shakespeare, you were reading from a white supremacist white man who was bigoted. Different lines of work that people have engaged in have been wrong. It's been fueling the capitalist system. The way that we thought about gender is wrong. There's not just men and women. There's a whole spectrum of things. There's non-binary. There's 38 different genders. The way that you spoke, the way that, just about 5 or 6 years ago, the way that you used pronouns was wrong. You shouldn't just assume someone's gender. You should use a neutral pronoun. All of these things, like literally all around us, we have been told the old way of doing things, as small as a pronoun to as big as your job or books you read, all of that we have been told was wrong. So when you're in your 20s, you're not looking for what's right. You're being plagued by wrong, wrong, wrong. Don't do this, don't do that, don't think that way, don't read that, don't do that. And it's really hard to chart a enthusiastic, empowering life course when you're, again, just beating against the current and these winds are coming at you telling you no, no, no. What is there to get excited about anymore? You go into your job. There's always going to be someone criticizing whatever you're doing in your job. Your country, part of growing up was being a citizen of the United States and looking at your country that you're a part of and feeling proud of it, feeling a sense of patriotism, and feeling a responsibility to take the baton of civilization that's been passed on to you and run forth with it diligently and improving upon things. That patriotism, that kind of responsibility was fun. It endowed you with a purpose. It endowed you with a civic spirit. It endowed you with a filial connection to other people. That was a life-empowering force. That has been severed. You can't express patriotism now, or it's seen as antiquated or even worse, bigoted. And so you kind of look around at life and you go, well, what's worth it? what's fun? What's exciting? What's something worth fighting for? My career is just my shallow attempt at making money. Supporting my country is just my latent bigotry. And getting married is just an antiquated old institution that's going to let me, lead me to the home and child rearing for the rest of my life. Identify one thing for me right now that is packaged as fun. Getting rich is packaged as fun. Flying on private planes and posting on Instagram is packaged as fun. But is it really? Because you look at those individuals, and again, I've seen this up close. You look at those individuals who on paper have everything and they actually have nothing. They are empty. They are unhappy. They are bored to tears. That's why a rich internal life, rich experiences are so important. Merit also isn't rewarded the way that it used to be. And so that has a compounding effect of making you not excited about your future. You're not excited about it because everything is wrong and oppressive and antiquated. But also, you're not excited about it because you don't think anymore that you have a lot of power over it. I was talking to a friend who works at a pretty big corporation, and he was just saying to me, you wouldn't believe how woke this place is. The way that in their hiring practices, because he's on one of the hiring committees, he said in one of their hiring practices, they don't ask minority applicants technical financial questions because it can be seen as racist or overly grilling them. People with different non-binary pronouns get more preference in the office. There's so much of this woke entanglement, and people get jobs, people get admissions to universities, people get loans and grants, not so much anymore on their own merit, but because of their immutable characteristics and boxes they can check. And as someone who is entering the world, that is a very demoralizing thing to swallow. You don't think that if you work hard, you can achieve what you want in life because you see these various forces working against you. That's why when I talk to people and they say, oh, well, what's the harm of, having it be a little woke? What's the harm of having a pride flag in an office room? What's the harm of this? What's the harm of that? There is always harm. It's creeping and it's around corners and it can influence one's culture and have a very demoralizing effect. Are we starting to see why so many people my age are depressed? It really does make sense. And the final thing I'll say is that while many elements of our culture which we would seek to emulate have been severed and attempted to be destroyed, it's been replaced with a rancid, transactional, professionalized culture. I talked about how many people now go on to their jobs or go on to their fancy graduate schools because of the image that it would project to people. Think about the role models that we have in society now. We laud people like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or these other titans of industry. And in many cases, their hard work and their ingenuity deserves to be commended. But the point is, we don't focus on their hard work and ingenuity. We focus on Zuckerberg's palace in Washington, D.C. We focus on Elon's private plane. We focus on the, again, transactional or shallow elements instead of the good stuff, instead of the good character and the good hard work and the good ingenuity behind that. And so I want to do a little thought experiment for people my age. If you could go on an incredible vacation, all paid for, you could go to the best part of the world, you would have a blast, but you couldn't tell anyone about it. You couldn't post on Instagram. What would you do? Would you go? Would that be hard for you? If the answer is that it would be hard for you, then that means that we have succumbed to this demoralizing, damaging culture. An internal life, a truly rich internal life, I think, is what will sustain the good life. And that is something that we should all be focusing on achieving right now. Thank you for joining me today. If you have any thoughts about how to navigate your 20s, please, I am all ears as a 23-year-old on the cusp of it, just trying to do my best. I view everything I'm doing right now as like investing in a long-term project. The way you invest your money is important, but also the way you invest your time, actions, and crucially, your brain is most important of all. So you can write into me at julie@julie-hartman.com, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.